Oh, well, welcome to the Mindfully Gay podcast. It's an exciting day. Spring got started the other day. The
Yes.
sun is out.
Ah.
I felt like every vitamin D3 got activated in my body.
Right. Full charge. Full charge.
So, and then we've kind of had some writer's block this morning.
Yeah.
It's like we need some topic ideas.
I think the problem is we have topics. We have a lot of topics.
Yeah.
It's just, which one to really kind of go with and what we're resonating with at the moment and what we want to share with you. So, so in a sense, yeah, some podcast block, but just so many ideas because we get ideas and we get ideas from you. So if you have ideas on what you would like to hear from us on the Mindfully Gay podcast, send it in. We'll put it on that list. You might even hear about it.
And if you want to be a guest.
Oh, yes.
Because it's interesting. We've reached out to a few people. We had one guest and then we had a technical flop. And I don't think they're happy with us now. But we've invited some other people and people get a little anxious about this. But if you have some perspective, you don't have to be an expert on anything. Just if you want to be part of the conversation,
right,
or engage with us, again, this is about building community. So we started calling some of our friends.
Yes, literally.
And we record very early in the morning, and we're learning that coffee is necessary to initiate brain activity with some of our friends.
Yes.
But one of our friends came up with a really interesting perspective about talking about coming out stories and moments of inspiration and coming out that were positive and affirming from our friends, allies, and families.
Yeah.
And I thought, that would be a nice tone.
Yeah, because it is a nice switch from what we typically talk about when we talk about coming out. I think early on in the podcast season, maybe episode 3, maybe, I don't know, we did talk about our coming out stories.
Coming out stories, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes, maybe not all the time, but sometimes there can be some trauma around coming out or just the hard parts of it and the struggle and being, maybe not accepted, all of that. And so our friend who gave us this idea said, hey, why not take a different perspective and tune into, hey, what were the positive aspects of coming out and who supported you?
Yeah.
And who showed up for you when you came out of the closet? So yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have nothing to say. No.
and I think it would be great because we're getting close to Pride. That's something we can certainly celebrate and kind of bring to light. So let's get into it. Just talking about the inspiring comments that we got when we came out.
Do you know, when our friend mentioned this topic, the first, I've been in practice for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
And so in the 90s, as people started to identify Pride counseling as a resource, when people suspected their kids were gay, or they had found out that their kids were gay, and then even later transgender, the phone calls I would get were phone calls from parents or loved ones who were really driven by a lot of fear. And I got so good at this that I could categorize the fear. And it was, remember, HIV and AIDS was a very different narrative in the 90s.
That's true.
And so I'm afraid they're going to get HIV AIDS. I'm afraid they're going to get gay mashed.
Oh, yes.
And what kind of future are they going to have?
Exactly.
And these were very
valid,
sincere, valid questions. Today is a very different narrative. I will have parents call and they'll say, I think my kid is gay. How do I get them to come out? It's like, slow down, sister. Right? Or I think my kid might be transgender. And how do I, I'm recognizing signs and symptoms, whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
But I'm recognizing something in my kid or my loved one, and I'm wondering why they don't come out to me. And even when I do training with other professionals, how many professionals or loved ones take it personally when they feel like their loved one is somewhere in the queer continuum, but not disclosing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a really interesting contrast.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, we're certainly in a different time now where, I mean, literally kids are coming out,
Yeah.
because it's just so much easier, I guess, and so much more support because of peers and just like what you're experiencing with now parents wanting to be more supportive and there for their kids who are coming out and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, can you think about, I mean, just your coming out experience and who kind of rallied around you? Who helped you or gave you some inspiration?
Well,
Hmm.
that's a tough story for me
Ah,
because you have to remember my world was Mormonism.
true. Mm-hmm.
I was married
Mm-hmm.
with a child.
Mm-hmm.
And so my entire support system was this incredibly conservative world.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came out, I did it because for two different reasons. One, my own discomfort was so complicated, but two, I was beginning to recognize that the awkward relationship I was having with my wife had the potential of impacting my daughter's worldview
True.
about relationship.
Right.
So when I came out, it was a very lonely time
Mm-hmm.
because I had no sense of community, where to find it, where I might belong. Um, so my very first ally,
Mm-hmm.
I was in graduate school, and there was a professor there, and we had written a paper, and it was a reaction paper. And I forget what we were reacting to, but I remember the impact of that paper caused me to think, oh my God, this is my story.
Hmm.
Like I've been in this place of silence
Mm-hmm.
because I thought I was protecting people, and yet I'm
Mm-hmm.
destroying myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I wrote this paper, it was a very personal paper, and it started out, I'm 20 something years old, I'm married, I'm Mormon, I work at the Utah State Prison, and I'm gay. And I've never acknowledged that.
Wow.
And then the paper then proceeded to detail what my life would look like if people knew I was gay at the prison, in my religion, in my family.
Wow.
Now, in those days, we typed our papers.
Yes, on a typewriter.
And you handed them in.
Yes.
And so I was going through my paper to see what the professor wrote it, and a big Sharpie, it just said, "See me now!" exclamation point.
Wow.
And
What was your heart doing?
I thought, I'm fucked. So the professor sat down with me and started, she was genuinely concerned. And she's like, do you know any other gay people? No.
Mm.
Do you have you ever read a gay novel? No. Have you ever seen a gay movie? No.
Wow.
And she expressed a lot of affirmation and gave me part of my story is I had seen all these therapists who were kind of agenda driven, and they were all very bad experiences with therapy. And I had told her that was in my paper. And so she gave me the name of 3 queer positive therapists.
Mm.
And so I followed through and met with one of these therapists. And that was, so between that professor, and then that professor continued to check in with me.
Mm.
Like I could go to her office and visit.
Yeah.
And she would just, how are things going?
Mm-hmm.
She was maintaining a professional distance, but also want to be supportive.
Sure.
But it was the therapist in particular who just provided a really great platform. It was the first time I had sat with a therapist where I could just talk and be witnessed. And I could start decompressing all the narratives. And she never pushed any kind of agenda. I had no idea of her own marital or status or relationship to sexuality. And she just provided a place.
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of like my container.
Yeah.
And so it just gave me a lot of room.
Mm-hmm.
Like my entire process had been in my head.
Right.
And now I had a place where I could give it air and breathe it through. And she never really imposed any particular judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was powerful for me. And then, I started dating in that. And I would say probably the one person that helped bridge the theory of being gay and trying to figure out who I was as a gay person is I had a colleague who was a gay man who was about my age. And him and his partner kind of took me under their wing. And so they took me to my first gay bar. They took me to my first Pride event. They took me to a play.
Mm-hmm.
And so what felt very scary and daunting on my own,
Mm-hmm.
they kind of became my ambassadors.
Right. It just sounds like just kind of that the stepping stones, towards a greater coming out and being you. It started with that professor.
Yeah.
Just saying, come talk to me.
See me.
See me.
Now.
And then seeing that therapist where you felt like there was this container and a space, a safe space, I assume, where you can kind of unpack. I think that's important to realize, and I'm glad you're sharing that, because, I'm just thinking about people now, even, kids, adolescents, adults, even older adults who are in a place of discovering who they are right now and not feeling like they have a container to safely say who they really are. Because like you said, in our coming out process, and we've talked about this before, we do a lot of that work in our own little heads, right? And to be able to have a space where you feel safe to express yourself, because it sounds like there was no judgment, there was no agenda. You got to just be you.
So who are your heroes?
Well, I'm thinking of, I certainly have shared my coming out story, but I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I am thinking about the people who were around me, and I felt very well received and lifted up. I came out publicly in college. I had already been kind of out to myself and a few people, but it was really not until later in college, because I went to our senior ball, and I was young in college. I was like 18 or 19 as a senior, and I was out. I had publicly come out a few years earlier, but I asked a guy to the senior ball, and when I told some of my friends, because we're gonna, at that time, you go as a group. You kind of did it in high school too. You went as a group. Let's get a limo and let's go to dinner and do the thing. We'll go to the hotel where they're having the ball and all of that. We'll go together. And when they found out I was going with a guy named Mark, I got such an overwhelming hooray from my group of friends. Like, that is so cool, John, congratulations, and the hugs. And what made it extra special was like, John, we've got your back. If anyone gives you a hard time at the ball or anything, you don't worry, we've got you, That's when I really felt supported by my friends who were, non-gay. They weren't gay. Just having that outside influence and support and love was very comforting, and it just made that whole event easier and fun, and even just stepping forward, even after graduating college, just things I was able to step into after that, just knowing that I had that experience. There are people who will support me in whatever I do, and so that was a highlight for me.
It's nice to know you have your personal security with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have to pay them or anything.
Yeah. still had to pay for your part of the limo, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting how people show up, and I'm thinking about, just to be a little academic here for a minute. So it used to be when I would give presentations and I would talk to professionals about the coming out process. There was actually some research out. It's very old research, but I remember very specifically saying statistically, most people come out in their early 20s, around 21, 22. The first people that we come out to are our peers, our friends.
Our friends.
The last people we were coming out to were our family members.
Yeah.
And a couple of things. The difference of time. So if I'm coming out at 20, 21, or 22 to my friends, I don't really start addressing my family members until 25, 26, and 27.
Interesting.
Those were the ages.
Wow.
It blows me away when I have a parent calling and saying, my kid is 13, my kid is 12, my kid is 14, my kid is in junior high.
Yeah.
That people are identifying. There is no way in hell I would have ever came out in high school. And for me, I went from high school to the military to a Mormon mission. So it's like, but high school, just no way. And I cannot really say that any of my classmates stood out as they're probably gay. But what's interesting is now, 40 years later, almost 50, all these years later, who's coming out as gay or shows up as gay, it's like, really? Like, wow.
Yeah. I remember, now going back a little bit, like, because I grew up Catholic, so I went to, like, all my education was in Catholic schools. But in high school, primarily, is when I was really being more aware of my sexuality. And I had come out to myself, I was like, okay, I'm gay, but I'm not going to tell anybody, I'm just going to kind of keep it to myself and just my own stories that I would create, and even just how I would betray, put myself out there and try to fit in as best as I can. And either I did a really good job, or I don't know, there was other distractions. It was interesting because I remember those other kids in school that got really picked on and bullied. And I didn't. I lucked out because I think I felt like I really stood out, but I guess I didn't. So I got lucky in that way. But I did keep it a secret. But it was something that was just building up inside of me. And certainly there was the impact of being Catholic and what the Catholic Church said about homosexuality. Even though that was being said, I didn't feel too much pressure from that, because there was never someone on the pulpit, scolding and shaking the finger and, you're going to go to hell. It was never that as far as my church experience, but just overall kind of the Catholicism and its view on homosexuality, which really changed when I went to college, which is a different story. But anyway, my point is, I just felt like, yes, I come out to myself, but I can't contain it. I can't hold on to this anymore. It was really influencing me. And just kind of looking around me like, well, who could I tell? Who could I trust? And because I didn't get the sense that anyone else, at least in my circle of friends, was gay. They were certainly friendly and cool, and I had good friends, and I still know a lot of them still today. But it was one in particular. I just felt that I can trust this person. And I can remember being in tears, because it was just so full of emotion around it and just so heavy with it. And when I finally told her, she was like, I know. And it's okay. So she knew, or had a sense at least, and just softened it up for me. It's okay. just made it okay. And that like took like all of the weight away. Just
Yeah.
knowing that just that one person said, it's okay. I'm going to get emotional about it, thinking about it now. It's just tremendous. And
Especially when you're feeling so hostage in your own mind.
in your own mind, in your own body, and just thinking the worst, that they're going to ostracize me, I'm going to get bullied like that kid over there, or my best friends are not going to like me anymore. I mean, just all that stuff as a kid, as a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid, right? Because I was pretty young when I came out in that way, right? So to have, I mean, I'm just thinking of the elements that would need to be, I guess, present for someone to feel like it would be okay to come out, and what you could expect. And just you talking about having a safe space where there was no agenda.
Yeah.
To unload and unpack, to have someone who just says, it's okay.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I did this conference, and the way I started the conference is I asked the audience, and in this case, there were mental health providers, and I said, what do you need to know? Like, I can sit here and assume that, I need to teach you that G stands for gay. No. Right? But you're in the trenches, you're dealing with people. What do you need to know? And in both cases, there were two different classes. The thing that came up was, how do we help parents and loved ones and allies navigate the new information of someone being gay or transgender?
Right.
Or questioning their gender identity.
Yeah.
And I kind of, as you're talking like about your friend who was affirming, who, kind of gave explicit permission. I don't think it was permission, explicit, I love you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just, it was like, it doesn't matter. It's okay. It was just okay.
But I wonder, for those who are listening, and now we know we have all these straight people listening to us.
Yeah.
Like, what would be our encouragement? Like, how do we? Because sometimes I feel like people are too. I sometimes have this experience where people are kind of going over the top to say, "Okay, yes, I accept you," kind of a thing. Like. And so I think, like, what is that balance? It used to be, too, when parents realized they had gay kids, for instance, that gay kid could get away with shit. And I look at them and say, I'm gay and I wouldn't let my gay kid do this. There are still rules.
Yeah, there's still rules in this house. Yes.
No, you can't have a sleepover. Not till you're 30.
Right.
So, yeah, like, what would be, if our audience was allies and those helping professionals that need to know, how do we create an affirming space? What could they do energetically, emotionally, socially? Like, what could they do that would signal to the closeted 14-year-old or, right, closeted Mormon that, hey, I'm going to love you no matter what? And I will preface this. People who are in the closet are great detectives.
Oh, yes.
They're listening very carefully.
Yes, they are.
To who'd you vote for? Where do you align yourself on the continuum of the issues of morality, and that will that potentially exclude me? When you make right, like, they hear all that.
Yes.
Because what I'll hear from the client is, oh yeah, they voted for this person, and so I don't think I can ever come out to them. Right. Or the church means everything to them, and I'm not sure that means they can accept me. Right? Like they're communicating what they've heard or witnessed. Right? And so kind of that power of affirmative kind of energetics really has to be part of a lifestyle. Yeah. Has to be part of a professional presence, has to be integrated into who you are as an individual. You can't just say it. and then act counterintuitive to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I want to put that out there because I often ask a client, well, how do you know they're not going to accept you?
Mm-hmm.
And they will have a list.
Mm-hmm.
I remember this and I remember that. And I remember
Right.
my mom was watching this TV show and said, boy, if you ever come out as gay, it would just kill me.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they hear that.
Yeah, they hear that and it sticks.
Yeah.
It sticks. It could be one little statement. You're right. As the in the closet individual, yeah, we're sponges. We have X-ray vision, we have amplified hearing, and we take it all in. And if it's just one little comment, um, or how you might judge a thing or a person, a comment like that, on seeing someone on television, if my kids came out and they said something like that, that's like a
Yeah.
done, scratched off the list.
Mm-hmm.
It's very I don't even know what the word is, but I think that's a really good statement to make for those who are wanting to be
Yeah.
open and affirming to their kids, colleagues, friends, etc. Like, yeah, I wouldn't mind, but we know we've got a list.
Well, and I'll tell you this, just speaking from the professional sense,
hmm
I will have clients who will come in and say, oh, I was working with therapist so-and-so, and they were really pretty good.
hmm
But,
Mm.
and I said, what do you mean? Well, they were really good with the depression. They were really good with some of the mental health stuff. But I just know they could never handle this. What makes you think that? Because as a therapist, I think it's going to be best for you to stay with your therapist. But then they'll say something like, well, my therapist had a picture of her and her husband in front of the Provo Temple. Nothing was ever said.
Nothing was ever said.
But that picture, that's not to say you can't have a picture of you and your spouse. But if you attach it to something like the temple.
Yeah, a story.
Or if in the conversations that professional is always preferencing or privileging cisgendered mentality or heteronormative ideas. Tell me a little bit about your wife. It's like,
Gulp.
I'm not married.
Gulp. Right. Yeah.
So, right, there's something about our language and our vernacular. So back to the question, right? If we were saying, here are like the top 5 things people could do to communicate. Because I think people sincerely, in 2025, I believe that most people, when you hear about what's going on politically right now and how they're trying to shut down DEI and shut down LGBTQ and stuff like that, yeah, there's a pocket of people who are driven through a sense of ignorance, if you will. But I would say most people are invested in not regressing.
Right.
That they want to support the progress and do what they can for their loved ones to create that container of inclusion.
Gosh.
So what would we say to that?
This has made it tough, actually, knowing that we've already put our restrictions on things. What can that person do? It's going to be about their actions. It's almost like they're going to have to prove to me that they really are and they really can be an ally to me. Like, I need to see them out in the wild doing what I would consider affirmative kinds of things. They're kind to animals. They're kind to their kids. They're saying very affirming and opening. I mean, that's very generic and general, but actions are going to speak louder than words, just to use that phrase.
Kind of like the template of their life is inclusion and kindness, whether it's around sexual orientation, race, gender, whatever, right? So I know we've talked about this in past podcasts, and I know that I think we've grieved a little bit of the past, that like Pride used to be a time where we could come together and just be like super gay and not worry about it, and maybe bemoaned a little bit like, oh, suddenly all the straights are showing up. But plus side of that
yeah.
is when they do show up
yeah.
in queer spaces, when
Yeah.
they show up in politically affirming
Yeah.
spaces for queer issues,
Mm-hmm.
when they like the different kinds of protests and marches and events and right. When I see those people there, I just
Mm-hmm.
think, okay, their actions are congruent.
Yeah.
And I may not even know them, but if I see them at, I was going to say Walmart, but I would never go there. No. But if I saw them in some kind of public place, it would just register, oh, I saw them at that gala,
Yeah.
or I saw them at that event.
Mm-hmm.
When they talk about going to Pride, they don't go there bemoaning all the freaks.
Mm-mm.
They go there saying, wow, that was affirming, that was refreshing, that was curious, that
Mm-hmm.
was
It was fun.
yeah.
They go because it's fun, and I get to go with my friends, and so yeah, that gives the newly gay or the newly out person perhaps. Oh, okay, that feels good. That feels okay. That feels good.
One thing I tell professionals, like healthcare providers and other mental health providers, like here in Salt Lake City, we have a gay paper called the Q Pages. I like to include literature or visual stimulants that would suggest this is an affirming space.
Mm.
So maybe the Q Pages would be on the waiting room table. Maybe there would be as simple as a rainbow sticker.
A rainbow sticker, exactly.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be much, because I can tell you there would be times when I would go into a space like in the 90s, and if I saw something like that, I would immediately just relax. Not that we ever had the conversation, but I thought, oh, you're an ally.
Yeah, yeah. It's the same. It's just like what pieces, what icons are out there. Just like that person who saw the picture of the spouse in front of the temple, just a picture,
Mm-hmm.
just seeing that, that creates a story
Yeah.
in that person's head as a person. I'm not quite sure about that.
Right.
But even as simple as like a rainbow sticker or something like that in a window of a store or in your office, gay newspaper or something like that, some literature of some sort that is seems to be relevant and open to different populations and communities. Yeah, then you can kind of soften and feel like,
Yeah.
I might be safe here.
I know when we created the Mindfully Gay website, my intention in creating that with the resources that I had was to try to find really diverse images of queer, right? So people of color, people along the gender continuum, right? Even in dress and appearance. Like I thought, what represents the kind of diversity and tapestry of our community? How would I fit this in? And even when I look at the website, I think, oh, it's time to update it because some things have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
I think if I were a professional, I would want my web page, if what I want to do is serve a diverse community, then I would want to make sure I've done consulting with other organizations. And the first thing I do is I look at their website and I'll tell them, I look at your website and I immediately conclude this is not a place that I would go to therapy. And they're like, why? I say, I see no representation. You say you're LGBTQ friendly, but all the images and language is very heteronormative, very cis-normative.
Yes, yes.
So I think that's some professional advice, and yet I think that could be applied to personal pieces.
Too. I'm just thinking about, we're seeing younger people, come out these days, and and what is it about that scene that's allowing those kids really to come out? And I think, I'm gonna have to give a maybe a thumbs up to social media. just because now there's so much out there that is affirming. And if a gay kid who's in the closet is just kind of scrolling and seeing these images, like, oh wow, that's there, that's out there, that's out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many resources and availability of, or just opportunities for fitting in. I think it has been easier for a younger person to come out because they're just seeing all this stuff,
Yeah.
as opposed to maybe when we were growing up and coming out, we didn't see these images.
No.
We didn't see this stuff, right? Um,
Which is interesting because politically, right now in Utah, they're trying to erase all the images,
Oh, wow.
getting rid of the flags, getting rid of any presence in educational settings,
mhm.
right? It's like trying to, let's just wipe out all Asian Americans. They never existed. That's ludicrous,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I remember being a kid going into the library and I just would look up gay to see what was there.
Mhm.
And it was usually Joseph Nicolosi's book on reparative therapy.
Right. Or you see this, if there was a section in the library, it was, 3 books deep, and that was it.
Here's a confession.
Confession time.
Barnes and Noble, I think it was Barnes and Noble,
Mhm.
right? They would have a gay section.
Yeah.
And I remember I knew where it was and I would shop around. If there was no one over there, I'd kind of walk by and glance.
And keep walking. I know this story. Yeah.
Going back to social media, if I were like 14 or 15, I was wondering how mom and dad thought about these things. I might go to their page
Ooh.
and scroll to see, have they shared or have they got an opinion about any kind of gay thing happening.
Wow.
Or queer thing, right?
Mhm.
Like, like the whole pride flag ban in Utah, right? Well, I wonder if my mom or my dad or one of my parents, I wonder if they have an opinion about that.
Mhm. Right. And
I used to be a cop in
Yeah.
the military, so I do a lot of investigating.
that investigation. And even if that's the case, if you do find maybe some evidence, or you create your own story around, I'm not sure, or I think my parents might agree with some of that in some capacity, but I don't know for sure. I think you're still not in the dark. Those kids still have their peers.
Yeah.
That they can feel safe with and be themselves, and in a way be a little rebellious, I guess, but at least there's a container for, I can just be myself. And maybe, wishful thinking, and maybe that circle of friends, certainly becomes their little family, and maybe it encourages them to maybe talk to their parents or other people in their lives that, hey, it might be okay to talk to your folks about this. We got you,
Mhm.
you've got the support. You're not alone in this. We got you. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I guess social media can be a tool,
Yeah.
in a good way for folks in figuring out, how can I feel affirmed, where can I possibly fit in?
Well, and I think if I were an ally, access to information is vast, even on social media.
Even on social
right?
media.
I mean, I could just do a search, gay Utah, and I'm going to see clubs, organizations, resources, therapists. I mean, there's so much that will come up.
Right.
And so, I think that my other advice to allies would be willing to be educated. There is, as much as local and federal politicians want to focus on our genitals and what we do with them, we are a legitimate cultural identity. In fact, we're getting ready to do this presentation in May. We're going to do a podcast live at a conference.
Yes.
And, one of the gimmicks behind this presentation is for the audience to witness 3 gay guys talking unfiltered about their lives.
Yeah.
Because I think even still today, queer people, when there's non-queer folks around, we censor our narratives. Or if we're not censored, we're usually angry about it. Right? And so where was I going with this point? The idea of people getting an education. Oh, we're a cultural identity.
Yeah.
Right. And so like there's a language that we use with each other that I can promise you, if we use some of that language with our straight allies, they wouldn't know what we're talking about. They'd have to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like you and I can kick around the words cisgender, transgender, non-binary, because we live in a community where that language is used a lot.
Right.
But it's not so much so out there. I mean, all the times I have people say, what is non-binary? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What's with the they, them pronouns?
Right, right.
And they're not being ignorant.
No, they just don't.
They're trying to understand.
They're trying to understand. They just don't know, or it's politicized,
Yeah.
and that's how they're hearing about it.
If we're at the gym and I lean over to you and say, hey, is he family?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I know exactly what you're talking about, because that was the way that we were able to identify folks in our league.
Without saying, do you think he's gay?
We'd say, yeah.
Is he a sister? Is he a brother?
Yeah, we say, is he family? That's right. We certainly did.
And then the old days, and I think I came around as this was kind of transitioning out. There used to be a phrase, do you think that's a friend of Dorothy?
Exactly, yeah.
Right? Because a friend of Dorothy on the Wizard of
Oz.
Over the rainbow.
Get this? Are you learning?
You know, there was a huge uproar not too long ago when a certain leader of our country was misusing the pink triangle.
Oh.
And the pink triangle used to be as prevalent as a symbol as the rainbow.
Yeah.
But the pink rainbow, or the pink
triangle
was in reference to during the Holocaust.
Right.
Hitler also rounded up gay people, and they were identified, marked with the pink triangle. And so that was, in fact, there was a paper, it was a lesbian-based paper back in the 80s and 90s that used the pink triangle as its symbol.
Yes.
I forget the name of the paper.
Yeah.
But again, these are all kind of cultural nuances and how we interrelate with each other. You know, I would say there's a certain kind of physical affection, non-sexual, but just physical affection that gay men tend to share with each other and relate to each other, and a certain humor that we relate to each other, that when non-queer people are introduced into the room tends to get a little dampened down.
Yeah.
Right. And perhaps that's part of the social conditioning. Right. But I think if I were an ally, to seek out some of that information, to understand it, and then to maybe find a queer ally, you could say, hey, can I ask some questions?
Exactly.
I'm trying to understand this. Because I think historically what we've experienced is we're going to judge it before we even try to understand it.
Yeah. I think that's really, really good advice. You know, if, you know, you're hearing these terms or you see it politicized or whatever, but it's, what is this? And you are truly curious and want to know more about it. You know, maybe you have a queer ally and friend that you can talk to and have a one-on-one with them, right? And I just have some questions.
Yeah.
And just to better, understand and so I can just show up a little bit better, right? And I think that could be in the same aspect of someone who is gay and is coming out to, a potential straight ally. I think that straight ally can, a nice aspect, I know what I would appreciate was what you experienced. Just listen. Just listen. And without too many interruptions, don't ask too many questions right away. Just listen. Let them get what they need to get off their chest, because they've been holding on to a lot.
Yeah.
And they probably just need to, unfurl a little bit. And if you can just be there and allow, and maybe just a few nods and things like that, means very simple. And if you do ask a question, maybe it's around, how can I support you? What can I do for you? What do you need from me? And if there's questions about terms or things, just be honest. I'm not sure what that means. Can you tell me more about that? just be inquisitive,
Yeah.
be curious. And that'll certainly, take away from the person who is coming out not feeling judged or questioned, and you don't have to get all bound up again. It's like, oh,
I think I think what people need to understand is, and people hate this word, but it is relevant, is understanding heterosexist, heteronormative privilege, right? And part of that privilege makes an assumption
yes,
that heterosexuality is
the norm.
And if you're not the norm, you are then abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, part of the political debate historically has been, oh, they want special privileges. It's like, not really. What we want is to enjoy the privileges that you have, which might require you to modify them to be more inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So marriage equality was not about asking for special rights.
Right.
It was about saying marriage is not just a heteronormative experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's good.
I was having this thought. I want to say this in the context of what's going on politically right now, right? Because it feels like so much progress is being shut down. And I happened to catch this Instagram page. I don't know who this woman is. I was just kind of scrolling through. She's an author or something. But she made a really interesting observation. I'm going to see if I can paraphrase it. She said that right now, if I were working with a parent who had a child with bad behavior, I would talk to them about the extinction. Like when you're trying to shut down a behavior, it often escalates before it extinguishes.
Exactly. Yep. Very developmental. Yep. That's very true.
And so I try to prepare parents. It's going to get a little worse before it's done.
Yeah.
And she kind of uses this way of thinking in reference to what's happening politically around, right? That the powers that be are having considerable anxiety because the world that they knew is not as relevant as the world that's coming. If you think about it, right? Like you've been with me to Peru, and we've been all over the world. I have friends in Mongolia that I can literally pick up this phone and start texting with.
Right.
And even if they don't know English and I don't know Mongolian, I can run it through a translator. Our ability to connect is so much greater than what it used to be. Right? Remember when you had dial-up phones and you wanted to call someone out of the country, and it would cost you an arm and a leg. You might make a phone call and be $300.
It sure could.
Now you can do it on WhatsApp and
for
talk
free.
for 4 hours for free, right? The ability to be connected, the ability to be part of community on a global scale is huge.
Yeah.
Mongolia, in particular, is like this country that's very conservative, and yet Bruce and I go there as an openly gay couple, and they are so sweet and so accommodating, even though they may not necessarily understand it. And that what this woman was saying is that perhaps we are reaching this extinction space where things are going to escalate for a moment. They're going to flare up because there is this anxiety on the right that they're going to somehow lose or have to shift a reality. And that really what's happening is a new reality that is more inclusive, that is more connected, that is imagine how profound that can be if we hone into our connectivity as opposed to our differences.
Yes.
And that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Right? I live in a world where most people in my life get me and you and get me and Bruce and get our friends, and they want to be a part of what we have, and we share what we have with them. I see this with clients. I see this with young people coming out that every once in a while, there's a scary story. There's a problematic story. And it's usually someone who's still connecting up with the internet on dial-up.
Yeah, when you use that analogy, exactly. Yeah, I think it's a really good perspective to have, especially now when it feels so doom and gloom. Like, oh no, we're all just going to fall into this hole and just get sucked up and vanish.
We could be going through a threshold.
This is a threshold. I mean, when you kind of think about just kind of the archetype and the stories around, you know, death and rebirth, just like what we do in Lodge, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're doing. You know, we're letting go of the pieces of ourselves that no longer serve us, and welcoming the anew, et cetera, right? Well, that happens not only internally, but that's happening globally, universally, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how I am looking at this whole thing too. It's like, yeah, we're in a shift right now, a pretty big shift. Things have got to crumble and fall apart and break before the new can really emerge. And part of that is who we are as a people, who we are as a community, as a connected people. As you were saying, we're so much more connected now. And if we embrace that and use the power of that, you know, it's going to be like the ultimate linking of arms. Like, we've got this. We can get through this.
Yeah, we're not going away.
We're not going away. Link up, everybody. We can do this.
Yeah.
And if you've got your gay ally, your trans ally, your straight ally that you've linked arms with, you're going to get through this.
Yeah. You know, one of the things our friend brought up was like inspiration, like in coming out.
Mm-hmm.
What were those inspirational
Mm-hmm.
moments? And I want to expand that a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
just because I want to share something, but I'm curious how you can respond to it first.
Sure.
Is somewhere we're tutored to see ourselves differently, to kind of broaden our perspective. Because I do believe when we come out, the thing that drives us out in many cases when it comes to sexual orientation is who we're attracted to and who we want to be connected to. But then I think there's a period of understanding the social and the emotional and the mental and the spiritual of all those pieces.
Yes.
So I'm just curious,
Hmm.
like, where's the mentorship been, or where have been the moments of inspiration that have invited you to expand the story of your queerness,
Ooh.
your gayness?
I might get a little emotional. It actually does come from my parents, especially my dad. My dad was just the epitome of the nicest guy on the planet. If he had a judgment, he didn't share it. He was nice and kind to everyone. He would listen and just had this wonderful perspective and a very positive perspective on life in general, and never really raised his voice. He had a really good work ethic. And so that's my ultimate hero, my ultimate mentor, is that guy. And I think has really helped shape who I am today, holistically, you know, as a Black man, as a gay man, as a businessman. I mean, all the things I can attach to who I am as a human being, I can attribute, you know, to my father.
Mm.
And then I could even go way outside of that bracket, and people I don't even know, but maybe I'm a TV kid. I love television shows and characters and things like that. And I just happened to see a little brief interview of Bob the drag queen on the Sherry show, Sherry Shepherd. She has a talk show, and he's doing the circuit right now because he just came out with a new book. Bob the drag queen is a drag queen, and that's his name, and just came out with a great new book, which I'm starting to read, which is wonderful. It's called Harriet Tubman Live in Concert. And it's really good. That's a whole other podcast. But what Sherry asked him, you know, how are you the way you are, you know? And his response was, you know, why, how are you so confident, and how are you so, you know, you wrote a book, that's fantastic, you won Drag Race, how did you do that? And he said, you know what, I really wasn't there was certainly the bullying and all the stuff that was happening outside of my circle, but it was my mother, he says. It was my mother who just always said, "You're the brightest, you're the most beautiful, you're the bravest, you're the smartest," and just all these accolades. And he just absorbed that. That just became who he is, and was able to walk out into the world and just be him, and do that. So that's an inspiration to me too. Just hearing stories like that. That yeah, that exists.
Yeah.
That is out there. But if you can find who that is for you. For me, it was my dad, or maybe it's your best friend, or it's your neighbor, or it's a teacher. And I've certainly have had all of those, who, and it's sometimes just the simplest things that they said, or even just what they did. They may have just tapped you on the shoulder, or gave you a hug, and that was it. And that was the world to me, or that's the world to you. And it's, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. And someone just affirmed that. Someone just said, you're a good kid. You're an okay person.
It sounds like it started with dad.
It started with dad. I mean, it started with dad, but it's a reflection. It's a looking back at, how did I get here? Because I do that a lot. It's like, how did I get here? And when I track back, I can track back through good friends and colleagues and friends and teachers, but really it goes back to my very own household, where I grew up, my mom and dad, and that man, whoa, set the stage for me.
Wow. I think I think my expansive story, it was only a couple of years after I came out that I met Bruce. And then through Bruce and a woman that he was working with, we met Clyde Hall. And Clyde is from an Indian reservation in Idaho. He's a queer spiritual leader who understands native medicines. And he just introduced these concepts around sexual orientation, sexual identity, that had a historical context as well as a traditional narrative that was so outside of the Christian paradigm, that it blew my mind. And it's a paradigm that I reference frequently when I work with clients about what is the blessing, what has God bestowed upon you, that your queerness is a gift.
Yes.
And that has been a really powerful reframe. And through Clyde, I met Harry Hayes. And it was a 3-day meeting of Harry. And here's this man who is already well into his 80s, who was an activist in the 40s and 50s.
Right.
And my little mind could only conceptualize gay like in the 90s, 80s and 90s. And it ignited this idea that we have a history.
We have a history.
And so I want to so meeting Harry and hearing what motivated him, and then Charles Lawrence, who we've had on the show. I'd like to get Clyde on the show at some point. But we've had Charles on the show.
That's right.
And then all the elders that we have met, and some of that many of them aren't even queer. But because they come from this paradigm where spirituality is an inclusive concept. That, do you remember that time when we were with Ruben and we were on the bus and we had all the gay guys on the bus and we're all like doing what gay guys do, and Ruben just turned around and said, any shaman who knows what he's doing would recognize the powerful gifts that you have.
That was profound.
And there was like you could hear a pin drop on that bus.
Yes.
Because I don't think anyone was in that mind frame,
No.
but he was obviously thinking about it.
Yes.
And pronounced it, and we all drove very quietly to the next location.
Yeah, that was profound. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and so I think, and then what's interesting, and I kind of thought you were going to talk about maybe how yoga had kind of shaped that perspective, because I know as much as these teachers have given me, my just sitting and contemplating in a ritualistic spiritual space or a meditative space, watching how nature operates, all those things have become tools for me to develop and to evolve my sense of queerness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is my inspiration. And I think sometimes it's hard for me to relate to the difficult stories because I think I've somehow energetically, there's just no space in my personal world for that bullshit.
Yeah, yeah. Because I have to agree with that because I feel like they're distractions, they get in the way, and they just take up too much energy.
Yeah.
And that's why, gay, queer or not, I like inspirational stories, the ones that are uplifting, like that Bob the Drag Queen story,
Yeah.
or just, it could be a commercial even, some podcast, a book. This is all media kinds of things, but when I see that out there, that's uplifting and it's positive, it gives me some hope and like, I want to be like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can be kind like that. I am kind like that.
Do you know this comedian, Mateo?
Yes. Yeah.
Have you seen the meme where Bob the drag queen lets Mateo do his makeup?
Yes.
There's an inspirational story.
There you go. Oh my gosh.
So there's a shout out to Bob. There's a shout out to Mateo. Call us. Let's have you on the show.
Yes. Love to have you guys on the show.
Well,
as always, we can probably go on and on.
I know. I'm all warmed up now.
I know. What next?
So I think we want to thank you. I hope that this session, especially as we get closer to the Pride Day celebration, will inspire you to look for inspirational moments, to find the places of blessings and positivity about the special uniqueness that you bring into the world as a queer person. And hopefully Mindfully Gay is a tool for you to get there. So we look forward to you commenting on this. We look forward to you coming to our events, maybe shooting us an email. We'll take any form of communication. I'm not doing the carrier pigeon anymore, though.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we want to thank you for your participation. I'm Jerry.
I'm John.
And we'll see you next time on Mindfully Gay.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This way you won't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes where we continue to explore fascinating topics and share meaningful stories. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next episode.